So we're going to focus the most of the rest of this lecture on a very specific element of exponential functions, which is going to be compound interest. And I mentioned that in the intro. Compound interest, I think it was, I can't ever remember. It was like Ben Franklin or Einstein. You don't usually get those two confused, but one of the others said, dragging my chair here, one of the other ones said that compound interest was the greatest force in the universe. Actually, it might have been Einstein, because that would be more appropriate. So we're going to actually go through the derivation of the formula for compound interest, because you may or may not have seen it before, and you should see at least some derivations in this class, so we'll do this one. So the idea is, say I borrow $10,000. Do 10,000? I'm just going to do $1,000. Say I borrow $1,000 at 4% interest. I'm going to skip spaces so I have some room to color. At 4% interest, compounded annually. So remember that compounded annually, that means I calculate interest once a year. So I calculate interest once a year. So the question is, how much do I owe after 1 year? All right, so first of all, I want to make sure that you can convert this. Remember to convert 4% to a fraction. So we have 4%. We want to convert it to a fraction, so we move the decimal over 2 places. So 4% is the same thing as 0.04. Make sure you got that down. So to figure out how much money I owe, hopefully we'll say, well, I'm going to owe this much in interest. My interest amount, I'm just going to say my interest, I'm going to calculate, it's at 4% of 1,000, right? 4% of 1,000. So when I say of, that means times 4% of 1,000. So this is my interest. My interest is, that's a bad 4. My interest is $40. So how much I really owe, the amount that I owe is equal to the original amount I borrowed plus $40, right? So now after a year, I owe $1,000, or $1,040. So really what we did here, we want to start putting some letters to it, because we're going to try to derive a formula. So we're going to call the amount that we borrow P, which means principal, the rate R for rate, and so we said I is interest. So to calculate interest, what we did is we said that interest was equal to, so what was the letter for 1,000? So you go back and you say, this is how you derive a formula. You say, okay, well, not exactly, but kind of, it's how you get started. And say, well, I said it was 1,000. So which letter represents 1,000 in my equation? So I said, oh, okay, we decided that we're going to start calling P, the principal, 1,000. And then what did I call 0.04? 0.04 was my rate, and I said rate was going to be R. All right? So I can say that my interest equals my principal times my rate. So you see, when you see these formulas, they're not just dumb that people just made up. I mean, they come from somewhere, and this is how they come up with them. So my interest is my principal times my rate. So the amount that I owe after the first year is equal to, again, that 1,000 is my principal plus my interest, and I said that interest is equal to principal times rate. So now, all of a sudden, you got an equation for the amount you owe after 1 year. So I could plug in 10,000 at 5% or $2 at 9% or anything that I wanted. I now have a formula that I can use. We are going to factor out a P because it's something we're going to need to do later. So if I factor a P out, I'm going to get 1 plus R. So after the first year, I owe P times 1 plus R. So you made a formula. Hey, you contributed to the thing which you may hold most special in your heart. All right. So that said, how much do I owe after 2 years? So can you figure that out? If you're interested, take a second, pause me, and go see if you can work with it and get something out of it. How much do I owe after 2 years? Well, the important thing to remember is that now when I calculate interest, am I going to calculate interest off $1,000? Well, no, because I didn't pay him back last year. Last year I owed him $1,040. So now they're going to charge me interest on all of the amount that I borrowed plus the interest. And that's where the word compounding comes in. So it means that I get charged interest on the interest. And that's why not investing, but putting your money in a CD or something like that pays off so well, is because you're earning money, you're earning interest on your money, and then you're earning interest on that interest, and then interest on that interest, and interest on that interest. And that's how you end up making a ton of money. Interest. Charge interest on the interest. So my new interest rate is 1040 times 0.04. So 1040 times 0.04. So $41.60. So my new interest is $41.60. So the new amount I owe is the amount I owed last year plus $41.60. And think about it, this makes sense. If you don't pay your bills, it's not like, if you take out $1,000 on your credit card, it's not like they just charge you, 18% once. They charge you 18% again and again and again, and then they charge you 18% on that 18%. Every time you don't pay, you get charged. So they're not going to say, well, I'll just calculate on what you originally, borrowed, because they're not going to make any money. The best way to make a lot of money off of you is to keep charging interest on the interest. So the new amount that I owe is $1081.60. All right. So let's look at this in letters and see if we can make some progress. So the interest is the 1040. Now that's not P anymore, because that's the amount that I owed at the end of last year. So how much did I owe at the end of last year in letters? This, right? That's the amount that I owed at the end of last year. I owed that at the end of last year, and now they're going to charge me the rate again. So the amount that I owed last year times the rate is going to be the interest. So now the amount that I owe is the amount I owed at the end of last year plus the new interest, which is P times 1 plus R times R again. Okay. If this is weird, go through it once, and like you're doing now, and then, put your notes away. See if you can recopy them. Try recopying your notes, see if it makes sense then. And if not, come back and watch the video again, because the more you see it, the more likely it is to make sense. And if it still doesn't make sense, let me know and I'll fix it. So I'm going to say now I'm going to do something a little fun. By little fun, I mean astronomically fantastic. So I'm going to put a secret 1 right here. So I've got 1 of these, and I have R of these. So I have 1 of those plus R of those. So if I have, think about it like this, if I had 1x plus rx, how would I solve that? If I had 1x plus rx, I would have, well, you might say I factor out an x, and I'm left with 1 plus r, right? If I have 1x plus rx, I have 1 plus r x's. So by the same logic, if I have 1 of these thingies plus r of these thingies, then that must mean that I can simplify it by saying I have 1 plus r of these thingies. Okay? If I have 1 of those plus r of those, then I have 1 plus r of those. Okay? So I'm just going to write it a little bit better. 1 plus r, p, 1 plus r. Now again, I'm going to make another similar statement. If I have one of these times p times another one of these. Think if I had one of these times p times another one of these. How would you simplify that? If you had x times p times x, how would you simplify that? Well, hopefully you say, well, it means I have p, x times x is x squared. So we're going to do the same thing again. I have one of these times p times another one of those. So I have p times 1 plus r squared. And that's the last iteration of that we're going to do, I promise. So at the end of second year, I owe this much. You say, wow, that was so exciting, I can hardly stand it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to generalize, because that's how you make formulas. So we said at the end of the first year, I owed p times 1 plus r. Now at the end of the second year, I owed p times 1 plus r squared. So can you see a pattern yet? Pattern yet? What do you guess how much I would owe after the third year? What if I put a 1 here? Would that help? Like, no, what's wrong with you, woman? All right, at the end of the first year, at the end of the second year, you there yet? At the end of the third year, what are you guessing? P times 1 plus r to the, get it? Can you get it? Can you get it? 3. So at the end of the fourth year, I would owe a times p to the 1 plus r to the, end of the fourth year. Good. All right, so if we're going to generalize, I'm going to say at the nth year. So nth is just a word like first, second, third, fourth, just like, you know, nth. At the end of the nth year, I would have a equals p times 1 plus r to the n. All right, so now you have a formula. Yay! So if I borrow p dollars, or if I invest p dollars at a rate r, actually let me change that n, if you would, to a t, because I want to use n later. Let me change that to a t. If I borrow p dollars at a rate r for t years, I'll owe, eventually, oh, let me actually fix that because I want to add another critical statement. All right, for t years, oh, I'm going to say compounded annually because that was one of our assumptions. Now I'll say I'll eventually owe p times 1 plus r to the t.